Should American troops be put in harm's way almost as bait, waiting to see if a hostile actor is going to kill them? Should American troops be used as basically disposable pawns to be sent out on missions or placed in areas where they could be literally killed just to see what kind of response we could have? Now, the answer should be obvious. That should be a rhetorical question. It should be, well, of course we don't. But yet, when we see in practice, that nearly is exactly what's happening to us. And so far, these our troops in Iraq and Syria, as I've been talking about several episodes on this show now, it's been only by the grace of God or by sheer luck that any of them haven't been killed. Now, just to bring you up to date real quick, on October 27th, and again last night, United States fired missiles into Syria against Iran-backed ammunition storage sheds in the various parts of Syria, because so we say those were some of the places where Iran-backed groups were getting ammunition that they were using to attack us. Now, on the attack on the 27th of October, the United States came out and we said, our Secretary of Defense, the President said, this is meant to send a strong message to both Iran and the actors that it's unacceptable for the you to attack the United States here and our troops on the ground in Iraq and in Syria. Since that time, an additional 22 strikes have occurred, and obviously that message wasn't received. And in fact, here's how that went down on CBS News just earlier today.
We've put our assets militarily in the region, and yet since the last time we spoke, the attacks on us have only gone up. If our message is deterrence, are you concerned they're not getting that message?
And you're right. Since our last set of strikes, there have been additional ones, which is why we took another retaliatory strike last night to send a strong message to these proxy groups and to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force, that these are unacceptable. Now, they'll have some choices to make. And if they continue to choose to hit our troops, if they continue to launch these rocket and drone attacks, then we'll continue to do what we need to do to protect ourselves.
I mean, why would he want to keep saying that same phrase? We're sending a strong message. The anchor correctly just told you that your first message fell on deaf ears, and in fact, the rate of attacks went up. But yet we're still saying they've got choices to make. Well, you know what? We've got choices to make, because let me tell you what's going on the ground there. There's about 1,000 American troops and a number of other civilian contractors that are Americans in Syria, and there's about 2,500 troops in Iraq. And basically, they are just sitting in the desert or sitting in buildings in Iraq, just wondering if they're going to be attacked or going to be killed. That's how it's working so far, especially in Erbil. We're going to talk about that in just a second. They're not performing any security functions. They're not keeping you safer. They're not performing their primary job of defending America. They're just sitting in the desert, just as pawns. I mean, there's really no a more accurate way to put it. And that interview with Kirby continued on with the anchor asking him another question about our reputation and credibility in the region.
The U.S. has gone over there with our fists up, and it doesn't seem like Iran or any of these militia groups have scattered as a result. Should Americans at home watching this be worried that we've lost our power of deterrence?
I don't think that you could look at the map and look at the force posture that we have in the region, look at the influence we have across the Middle East, and be worried that the United States and our leadership is somehow in doubt in that part of the world. I mean, we have sent a strong signal, not just to Iran, but to other actors in the region, that we don't want to see this conflict with Hamas widen or deepen. And so far, we haven't seen that happen. We haven't seen another actor jump all in to try to help Hamas in their fight against Israel.
Is he kidding me? Of course we've lost our deterrence, because people aren't believing us. Just because another state or group like Hezbollah from Lebanon hasn't jumped all in on Hamas does not mean that our deterrence is working. By sheer looking at what happened after you sent the first so-called strong message, the rate of attacks increased. Now, let me tell you something. In last night's episode, when we first heard about this second airstrike, I went on there and I complained, saying, are we just waiting until an American is killed, an American troop is killed in one of these attacks? Because then there's going to be a strong impulse, as Senator Graham and several others are already actively talking about. If any Americans are killed, they want to use that as a justice to then attack Iran directly. That's what they've said. So we're just waiting for that. Now, We found out this morning, since I made that comment, just how close we came to that very thing playing out. In fact, if it wasn't for the grace of God or just sheer luck, however you want to look at it, that would already have happened. This was on Reuters reported earlier this morning. A defective drone in Iraq may have helped keep America from being dragged deeper into a widening conflict in the Middle East. The drone, which was launched at Erbil Air Base by an Iranian-backed militia before sunrise on October 26, penetrated U.S. air defenses and crashed into the second floor of the barracks housing American troops at about 5 a.m. But the device, laden with explosives, failed to detonate. And in the end, only one service member suffered a concussion from the impact. Let me just put that into different language here. If that drone had functioned normally, there would have been who knows how many killed in action and how many wounded. I don't know how many were in the bed at the time, but it was 5 a.m. And we've certainly seen this before when a barracks was hit in Beirut in 1982. And of course, everyone was there, and the whole building in that case was knocked out. But we've seen all these pictures, both in the Russia-Ukraine war and in the Israeli war, what one large drone can do to a building. I mean, there could have been dozens of Americans killed there. And only by the grace of God did that not happen. But nobody has taken any action to move us out, to get the troops protected by redeploying them elsewhere in theater where they're not in range of these violent Islamic groups. Secretary Austin, actually just prior to the first airstrike, went on ABC News to tell everybody just how important it was to protect our troops.
Recently, we've seen rocket and UAV attacks against bases housing our troops in Iraq and Syria. We're concerned about potential escalation. What we're seeing is the prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. And because of that, we're going to do what's necessary to make sure that our troops are in the right, good position, they're protected, and that we have the ability to respond.
He said, we're going to do whatever is necessary to keep our troops protected. You just heard it from the Secretary of Defense. He also said after about 5 days later, and again yesterday, that the President of the United States has no higher priority than the protection of our troops. Okay, if that was true, then we would be taking action to protect them. And I mean action. We would be getting our troops out of unnecessary harm's way and moving them into places where they actually have robust defenses, and they would not be at threat of direct attack by these groups. And again, I'll repeat, the only reason that these attacks are happening is because we're there. If our troops were not deployed in a pointless combat deployment, then they wouldn't be at risk at all. And whether it's Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq or whether it's some of these other groups, Iran-backed in Syria, they wouldn't be able to attack us. They would be frustrated, and they would have to try to find some other way if they want to draw us into a war. But it wouldn't be easy as it is right now. And let me tell you why I'm so motivated and so aggravated about this situation here. Because I've been deployed for the United States into combat zones 4 times. I've been on some of these isolated bases out in the middle of Iraq in one case, very isolated, just a small little contingent there. And we were at risk of if anybody had tried to attack our base. In that case, they didn't. But I know what that vulnerability is like. I also know what it's like when in Afghanistan in particular, when American troops that I know were killed in action. I know what it's like when those coffins come back to Dover Air Force Base. And I've seen images like you probably all have of the devastation that results in the families. Folks, our people who wear uniforms volunteered to serve our country. We volunteered to potentially put our lives on the line for our country. What we should never ask our troops to do is to go into harm's way, to just sit in barracks, to just sit in the middle of posts out in the middle of nowhere in a hostile country of Syria where we're not even invited, and just hope they don't get killed. Now, obviously, this attack here in Erbil in Iraq, that's because our air defense did not stop that drone. So it's not impervious. And that particular attack wasn't just out in the middle of nowhere. That's Erbil. That's in, if you don't know the geography over there, that's one of the bigger bases that we have where we do have lots of air defense, but it didn't work. Now, we just can't keep rolling the dice, hope that the next one also fails. Anything else gets through the air defense that we have Americans killed. No American soldier, if we truly care about our troops, should have to be killed, should have to sacrifice his or her life just because we don't want to get them out into areas where they are safe. And I'm just telling you, if the president really believes that the highest priority for our country is to protect our troops, then he needs to take action and to do what is necessary to get our troops out of there. I do not want to hear anybody in the United States Congress or anybody in the White House after an American is killed subsequent to this making of this video, and then say how brave they were and how they sacrificed their life for America, because it's going to be nonsense. It's going to be BS. That's about the nicest way I can put it. Don't believe that if that happens. God forbid that it should, and I pray to God that it doesn't. I pray that we do continue to have God's favor to keep our troops from being pointlessly killed. But if it does, I am not going to accept quietly hearing any of our leaders talk about all that normal kind of, ridiculous talk about how they sacrificed their life for our country, because it won't be for our country. It'll only be because they weren't taken out of harm's way when you had the chance. And we have the chance right now. Let's don't wait until it's too late. Protect our troops now. Now, that's all we got for you today, but we are definitely going to keep our eye on the ball for this, because ultimately we're out for you, and I'm out for the family members of those troops that are all deployed there. I guarantee you they're all on the edge of their seat and so nervous and probably praying like crazy. You should do the same if you're a believer in God. I am, and I will ask you to do the same thing. But let's care about them while there's a chance to make sure nobody has to go to a military funeral. We don't want to see those. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on Deep Dive.